This is an unprecedented time for high profile, high stress decision making on the part of education leaders. And so we at Trigo Ed thought it was a really good time to feature the best practices of a highly successful superintendent. We have Dr. Vic Shandor with us from York County, Virginia, and I'll do a little bit more intro in just a minute, but he's done a great job in preparing his team for decision making with clarity and confidence. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So our objectives are this. We're going to discuss some lessons learned from Dr. Shandor's district, and it's all around crisis leadership, particularly as it relates to decision making. There are such heavy duty decisions that are being made now that are so visible that you got to get it right the first time, or there are quite a lot of implications to pay for. We also want to work on today allowing you as participants to share your perspectives. We know that you've got expertise and experiences that could benefit others, so we'll structure that into our sort of our large roundtable discussion. So just so fortunate to have Dr. Shandor with us. Vic and I worked together about 12 years ago, we decided, right? So Vic was the Director of Special Education in Cabarrus County, right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And then he moved to become the Regional Superintendent in Fulton County, Georgia, one of Atlanta's big school districts. And he's been in the York County School District for the last 6 years as superintendent. So I've had the pleasure of working with him in 3 different leadership positions. I'm Executive Vice President of Trigo Ed. I've been with the organization for a while. My previous career was with Orange County, Florida Public Schools as a school and district leader, as well as originally as a teacher. So I have that educational background from many, many years. We're also fortunate to have with us today Michael Curran-Hayes. Michael is our Executive Director at Trigo Ed, and he's coming to us from Pennsylvania. So at Trigo Ed, we are a nonprofit based out of Princeton, New Jersey, and our mission is to help build the collaborative problem solving and decision-making capabilities of education leaders. And we do this through providing training and support, as well as consulting services. We've been in business over 25 years, and we've worked with many school districts in North America, actually about 850 or so, most of them in the United States. So we've been around for a while. Now, if you don't mind using the chat box to introduce yourself, that would be great. Just take a minute for you to do that, and you can check in the chat box and see who some of your colleagues are that have joined our session. Our format today will be more of an interview. I've got some interview questions that I'm going to be asking Dr. Shandor, and then I'm going to take some of those same questions and turn them around a little bit and ask you as participants to share, if you'd like, your experiences and challenges and successes, et cetera, as it relates to different aspects of leadership around decision making. Okay, Vic. So February of 2020, that probably seemed like 5 years ago instead of 5 months ago on one hand, and on the other hand, it might have been just yesterday, but you were in probably an unenviable and unique situation. Would you share that with our group today, and then our questions will be based on that in the future?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I hope your families are well. And as you're navigating this as a leader, I know there's a lot of challenges and struggles related to this. So, and I'm seeing in the chat, a lot of you are EC people, as we call ourselves sometimes. I'm a former special ed teacher. I started my career off as a teacher assistant many, many, many years ago, and I was a director of special education in Cabarrus County for 6 years. So let me give you a little bit of background about York County Schools. We have about 13,500 students. We're a sort of a suburban district located a little south of Williamsburg on the peninsula on the east coast of Virginia. We've got about 60% white kids, 12.5 Black, 11% Hispanic. We're only 22.5 free and reduced, 11.5 special education, 7.5 gifted, and then probably 4.5 EL. So it paints the picture a little bit about our district. The unique thing about York County School Division is we have about 43% of our students that are federally connected. So what that means is we're very heavy military impacted in our school division, which brings along advantages, but also some challenges as well. So February 3rd, so I guess I'll cut right to it. So if anyone has been a part of budget negotiations with your local county, you can certainly understand that those are contentious at times. So when you think about that, there's a lot of pressure that goes into that as you're navigating your initiatives for each year. We were in the middle of finalizing our budget on February 10th meeting, and it's about a $150 million budget, probably a $10 or $11 million capital improvement program. And while we were in that meeting, we got a knock on the door that someone said, the fire alarms were going off across the street. And across the street's about a mile and a half or so at the Grafton Complex. So the Grafton Complex houses about 1,200 to 1,300 high school students at the high school, and also about 950 middle schoolers. They're all sort of in one building, two buildings, but they're connected, and they share gym space. And when that first happened, we figured, well, it's probably your typical fan issue, or it was a belt, right? That's typically what we get, and then everything's fine. And while we were in our meeting, we kept getting knocks on the door that, hey, it's a bigger problem. So as we were because we heard it was an explosion, there was smoke, so we could not get a picture of what that looked like. So my chief operations officer, Dr. Carroll, he and I jumped in a car. We drove across the street, and there were, as you can imagine, fire trucks everywhere, and they let me walk into the building. And I took about one step in, and you couldn't breathe. It was that bad. There was that much smoke in the building. So essentially what happened, the main electrical panel that served both schools, there was an explosion in there, and it was burnt essentially to a crisp. So we knew at that point this was way more serious, obviously, than just a fan or issue. We're very blessed that no children or staff members got hurt. There were probably, the fire was about 3:40 in the afternoon. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of angst and worry. So I'll share two quick stories with you that sort of, hopefully they were funny, so to speak. So one, the principal sent out an announcement that there's been a fire in the building, and we had some athletes and kids in for tutoring and clubs, that there had been a fire in the school. We've evacuated the building. So there was a fire. Please come up and pick your child up at the funeral home. So if you could imagine getting that as a parent, that's not exactly the best communication funeral home. So anyway, there is a funeral home close by. So we've since evaluated our meeting point. So they won't be meeting in a funeral home. Second thing is, as we started getting people in the room, because initially when you have a crisis, you've got to get the right people in the room. While we were getting our folks in the room from operations and facilities and communications and instruction and all these things, just to start wrapping our arms around this problem, we had another staff member knock on the door and say we had people picketing. So I thought, the fire just happened 30 minutes ago. How can people be picketing already, right? So 411 is a Facebook group that people use sometimes to question, the division, et cetera. And immediately there was chatter about picketing. So we had a staff member run up to the elementary school, which sits next to our school board office. And it turns out they weren't picketing. They were high school cheerleaders who were finishing they were walking with signs for their fundraiser. So they were like selling, cookies or whatever. So a lot of different things happened within that first 35 to 40 minutes that we could shed some light on, that we're just, again, thankful no one got hurt. But again, we had to get the right people in the room. So Kathy, I didn't know if you wanted me to expand related to just the setup of the situation.
I think that's actually a good time to go to the next question. So one of the things I've heard you say many times, Vic, is that you got to start with the right people, because you had to have the right people in the room. But let's talk about who these people are and how did you get the right people. Just talk about the process that the district uses to make sure that you hire the right people.
Right. Well, To me, every interview I've ever had for a leadership position, I've always talked about the importance of the team and your fit and your role on the team, but you have to have the right people on the team. So when I think about this, this all starts with who you hire and how you manage performance. So we have a philosophy that we've used for 6 years in York County. It's just hire hard, make the hiring process extremely difficult for folks, so that they understand, what the expectations are once you eventually, get on the team. So we do that with a lot of skills. They have to demonstrate skills, scenarios, etc. But you also have to have look-fors as a leader. My look-fors are pretty simple. You got to have fire in your belly. You got to have passion, initiative, problem solving, people who are risk takers, but also people who have proven results. People aren't afraid to manage up. And when you think about manage up, I don't hire a lot of people that are yes men, so to speak, or yes women. So that's something that I had to get my HR team, my principals, and everyone to wrap their head around that. Guys, we're not just hiring the next people who think they're in line in the school division. We're going to hire the right people with the right skill set and the right fit for positions. All this starts with, the screening process for applications. Our interviews are extremely activity based. So for example, if I'm going to hire an assistant principal, they watch a classroom teacher instructing students on a video for like 40 minutes. Their first activity when they come to interview for us is to conduct a post-observation conference role play with 2 senior staff members. So while that appears daunting, if you understand best practice for instruction and giving feedback to a teacher and what that looks like, most likely you'll be successful during that opportunity. Once that's complete, we move to more behavioral centered questions. And behavior questions are basically around our leadership standards. This is something that draws out on their past experience versus your philosophy or your theoretical discussion, so to speak, in an interview answer. We want to know exactly what are some challenges you've had, what are some of your action steps that you've used to move the needle for students, and that's a big part of that. If you make it to the next phase, then you're brought to a school, and basically you lead with a 90-day entry plan. Once again, it's not a typical round robin process for interviews. You get on your feet, you present your 90-day interview plan to teachers, some teachers and some parents on an interview panel. This is really important. This will test, we'll test your research skills if you understand the dynamics of the school or department you're going to get into, your oral communication skills, your strategic intervention type skills, creativity. Also, we'll see your personality and your ability to think on your feet. If you make it through all that, then you get to sit with me, and that conversation is about an hour or so. And for me, the team's already vetted them. They've already made it to this point. Now they're bringing this person to see if I feel like they're the best fit for the division, not just for that school. And again, look for us there are courage, confidence, ethics, toughness. These administrative jobs are not for the weak, minded folks. I mean, they're tough. And I essentially interview them. I set very clear expectations of what leadership behaviors I expect. I ask the principal or director or whoever is bringing that person to me one question in the interview, and that is, why are you recommending this person join our team? And they have to really defend why they're bringing this person and recommending them to me. So at that point, I either welcome them to the team, take them to the board, or I tell them right there that I don't feel that they're a good fit to join our team. So just to give you some perspective, in almost 6 years, I'll reach the 6-year mark in November. In 5.5 years, I've hired all 4 of my cabinet members, pretty much all of my directors and all associate directors. Some of my folks have retired. Some of my folks have been promoted, and obviously some of them have gone on to other places to work. Out of my 19 schools, I've hired 13 of the principals. I've moved 4 of them to other schools. 2 of them remain in their schools. One is a very specialized alternative sort of program, and the other one will probably be moved soon. She just got to her school when I arrived, so she's finished about 5 years there. And as far as assistant principals, I have 28 assistant principals. I've hired 22 of them. So I feel really good about the right people, having those folks in the room, because we've sort of put a profile of what we're looking for, and those folks are in the room. So, an example of how we would use, for example, decision analysis, if you're familiar with these tools, we really use them around hiring. So when you think about, and I always do this, but when you think about, here are your people, you have 3 people at the top of the decision analysis. Here's the criteria I'm looking at on the side. How am I weighing those and comparing each other? And then when I get to the bottom of it, I can consider risk on who I'm going to bring on the team.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, having that decision analysis process, particularly when you've got 2 or 3 really close candidates, it allows your recommending group to defend why they picked the person that they did, because they got that kind of a structure for analyzing.
It does, and as a superintendent, you're constantly looking at who you're bringing on the team and balancing that team. I mean, some school divisions that you may work for, they're all internal hires, and or some districts are all external when a new person gets there. I personally feel like it's a blending of both of them. I feel like you've got to build a bench, build a pool of people, build some programs there to give hope and opportunities to learn, while bringing folks from other school divisions to help folks, bring fresh ideas to the team across multiple levels.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Dr. Shandor. I'm going to open this up to our group and just ask you, if you have a district-wide, organizational-wide hiring process, what aspect of the hiring process seems to work best, or perhaps is most challenging for you? Feel free to share either through the chat box or by unmuting yourself.
There are comments in the chat box already if you want to take a look at them. So Michael Sano says, this charter school goes above and beyond the interview process. You want to see teachers instruct in demonstration lessons. Let's see. I think Vic mentioned that there was some work in his district around that. Question about how long does the hiring process usually take, Vic?
Again, that will, sometimes it depends. And we have, again, since we're a military, high military division, we also have a lot of staff members who, maybe an assistant principal and then their husband gets orders and they have to leave. So sometimes in the middle of the year, we make those decisions. But typically that is or so, we try to pace that out. We put together a run of show of when the position is open, and then we typically it's a week between each stage. So we want to get all the applications in, vet those. The next week we want to bring some folks in for identify who they are for that pool process. From the pool process, then whoever is hiring can jump into the pool, figure out who looks like the best fit, then they can do the school site. So it's typically 3 or 4 weeks. I'd be lying if I didn't say we've had to expedite that on occasion. When I first arrived, I had 4 or 5 people leave last minute, and we had to quickly put together our pool process, vet our folks, and make some decisions. And that also helped us think through what does that support look like. So when I hire a principal or an AP, principals I meet with quarterly, so I go out and visit all of them, and basically use their 90-day entry plan as a launch pad for discussion. So while we make the process difficult and challenging to get into, once you're on the team, we really try to figure out how we can support you, what your identified blind spots are, and how can we help you grow.
So Vic, let's move on. So think about, you talked about having the right people in the room when you've found out about the fire in the facility. Why do you think having a collaborative approach, let's talk about the collaborative approach, was so important to you, to your success at that point?
Well, part of it is everyone has skin in the game. So from the division standpoint, we have an executive leadership team. I've got about 14 or 15 people on there who are in various roles, associate directors, directors, chief officers, et cetera, in a multitude of roles. So everyone's impacted by this. Our IT, communications, instruction, transportation, operations, facilities, maintenance. Everyone had to be in the room to share their concerns about how this would impact them. Because again, you think about the nature of the problem. How are we going to provide instruction to kids, to like 3,000, maybe 2,200 kids, and then all of those staff members? How are we going to do that And that's one track. And then the second track is how we going to fix the building, right? What's that going to look like? So we also had to have a lot of communication with the state of Virginia, the folks at DOE related to accreditation and waivers for hours requirements, et cetera. And for me, I like when my team pushes back on each other. I think it's important that they, share differing opinions, because I've said this so many times, it doesn't matter who's right. We need to be right. Like, our team needs to get this right. I don't care if I'm right or you prove me wrong, that's fine. I need to have the opportunity for people to be asked to ask each other those questions in those settings.
Hey, Vic, 2 more questions came in.
Okay.
Is it typical to move principals to different posts throughout their time in a district?
I think that's really specific to the superintendent and the performance of the school. I think there's a lot of value in giving principals different opportunities, especially if there's a fit. I moved a principal from one school. She had been there for 7 years at an elementary school, and honestly, I just moved her down to a different school. She was unbelievably recharged. She got to hire her assistant principal for that school. That school received, and that was 2 years ago. This past year, that school received one of the highest awards you can receive in Virginia. She was 1 out of 71 schools in the state that received this award. But you have to know your principals. You have to know what their strengths and weaknesses are. You have to also know when folks get tired and when they've been at a place too long and the team might not be responding to them. I really think you have to have a good you have to have a good pulse of your leaders, and that starts with my directors. I have folks who supervise principals at the elementary level and secondary, and they provide recommendations to me as well to make those decisions. Do I think that you can still have someone at the same school for 10 or 15 years? You probably could if it's the right person. But if I'm seeing a school that's sort of stuck, so to speak, and their student, how that culture looks in that school, they may need a jump start. We certainly start having those conversations about how we can help them get there. But I'm certainly not going to just randomly move teachers move principals. I'm not going to randomly do that. There's going to be a reason for it, that they sit in my office and we have that discussion about, making those decisions.
So Vic, one of the things I remember going back to the collaborative approach is that you had your core leadership team, but as you really work towards making decisions about how best to reassign these students and how to approach the facility situation, you really did a great job of incorporating key community leaders, community members. You had further down the process, you involved teachers and the implementation planning and getting their feedback. You had school and district leaders along the way. It would have been a lot quicker for you to just plow forward with your core leadership team. That is not what you did.
No, and part of that is understanding and knowing your community. Mm-hmm. I value input. I'm not afraid of a hard conversation. So I think our community over the past 5 or 6 years has gotten to see me in multiple situations, not just this big crisis, but other changes that we've had to make related to curriculum or staffing or budget or whatever. And I think part of that is building that trust. But part of it is making these decisions so everyone has a voice and feels heard and can feel about it. I mean, I think 2 days after we had the fire, I pulled in a lot of our church pastors and folks in the area. All I did was I asked one of them to connect with a few of them, and in 3 hours, I had 15 of them in the room.
Wow.
Talking about how they can help us provide childcare for families during the week, because we had to move to an alternating day schedule at 2 other schools. They talked about how they can provide childcare. They talked about they collected. I mean, the amount of donations that we received was unbelievable, and the people who sorted them were the firemen for us. So just getting your community invested in it and a part of the solution Part of it is creating the conditions, getting them in the room, having a process, and let them just sort of run with it, and then finding your space of how you're sort of in and out of that. They'll make the decisions for you when it comes to some of these things to meet the needs of our kids.
What I'm hearing with what you've said, this was really a good practice run for the whole COVID. And I know, we're going to get to that, but I start hearing you talk about bringing community members in, looking at childcare options, looking at childcare opportunities, looking at what options for reassigning kids, like the alternative days. So that kind of collaboration in February really must have helped set the ground space for then when the pandemic came and you had already established that collaborative approach.
Yeah, and I think when we've talked, Kathy, I've talked about how my team was built for this.
Yeah.
I think when you hire well and get the right people in the room and have a clear process when you're working through things. But for me, it was about common language, expectations, and confidence, right? So when you're in a room with your team and they take over and they start talking about through things and they say, I think we should do a scan for this. We've got to wrap our arms around this problem and really understand what the situation is, sort of assess our priorities and what our next steps are before we dive in, because that's what everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to solve the problem first.
Yeah.
You can't solve the problem until you wrap your arms around all the information. And I think that we've equipped our staff members in Cabarrus County. When I was there as special ed director, we did that very well. In Fulton County, we did that very well. And in York County, I think, we've done that well. So in essence, Kathy, you saved my career 12 years ago.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, but trying to put people in situations that they have the right tools, that they can work through these things. And then when they bring them to a director, a chief officer, or superintendent, they can defend them and they feel good about it. And let me say this, the most important resource we have is time. Can we do that? When I was a special ed coordinator for many, many years ago, I was running between all these schools trying to help solve every problem and doing all those types of things. I really wish I had a solid process that I could help my teachers defend why they were making decisions or recommendations. I wish I had many, many, many years ago, because that would have saved me so much time. And many of you on this call, we're educators. We have people who like to talk. Can we all agree that you have excessive talkers on your teams? I see a few of you smiling. And I used to be one of those excessive talkers, and I learned, probably 10, 12 years ago, put the problem up, give them the process, set some ground rules, and go. So we don't have to hear the history of the problem. I don't have to hear in 1962, this is what we did, right? We need to wrap our arms around what the situation is, what the impacts are going to look like. And then when you start going through, when you get to a DA for decision analysis and you come up with your absolute must, your absolute must is budget. Your absolute must is safety. Your absolute must is legal, right? I mean, there's 3 or 4 things that are always going to be your absolute must, and then you weigh that criteria, and then you can defend it. When I had to stand up in front of 900 families at one school and 950 at another and defend our recommendation of what we were going to do as a result of this fire, my team was confident. They were extremely confident in presenting it, and our community responded and understood why, because we painted the picture just, quite frankly, using the process. We went straight through. Here's what the problem was. Here's what we used as our criteria. Here's the options we considered. Here's why we ruled these options out. Here's the ones we picked as a winner, and here we consider the risk of this, and here's how we're going to mitigate those risks. Does that make sense? Again, I've been doing this for a number of years and can sort of talk through that, but it is the ultimate time saver, and it's the ultimate way to reel in some team members that may talk too much.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to turn it to our group now and ask you, how do you ensure that your stakeholders, now we're talking about your internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders that are so important. How do you make sure they're represented in decision making? Because it's a lot easier and quicker, if you just made the decision with poor leadership. bringing other people in makes it more complex. So how do you ensure that happens in your respective organizations? Open it up to the group.
I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas.
People talk about collaboration all the time, but walking the walk, it's a lot tougher.
Well, it is, Kathy, and I use the term collaborate.
Yeah.
Too many people who want to get in and just, talk to hear themselves talk, or they talk in circles. And again, having solid process. Christy Pica, who in our division, who's a math expert for us, is one of our leading Trigo facilitators, and she's the master of the parking lot. She's the master at redirecting things to the parking lot so we can get through the process. But I see Jennifer Claremont had a question. Did you want me to answer that question?
Sure.
Okay, so the question is, do you use any type of personality profiling software or programs as part of the application process, or do you go through some type of building capacity like a DISC profiling exercise? We don't do that. It's interesting. We try to, because our process is so difficult with the activities, we try to see folks in action. Whether it's, the 90-day plan is a really good example. We also have them do data analysis, and then they have to present data and present a plan to us. I just gave a couple examples related to that. So you can truly see their personality come out. It's very difficult to fake to get through one of our interviews. I've either tried to fake through an interview answer, or many of us have when we didn't know the answer. But this process sort of really weeds out and provides clear separation between candidates, because either you've done this before, you understand the research behind whatever that concept is, or you know how to analyze data and present it and find the holes in it, or you don't. But to answer your question about personality profiling, we do a lot of once you're on the team, we do a lot of different things. So you're probably familiar with colors. So we do use a lot of those on our teams because we want our teams to understand what they're dealing with. So, there's multiple examples around colors, whether it's the, what's the other one called? If you're an extrovert or an introvert, whatever that one is, EFTJ, I can't recall it. So we don't use those on the way in, but once you're on the team, we do that because it is important that once team members are in the room solving these problems, they understand where our folks are coming from, and they understand, wow, Greg over here is very empathetic, and we have to be sensitive to that, where Stephanie may talk so much, but she processes out loud. So she's not attacking us. She's just trying to wrap her head around it. So part of that is, yes, Myers-Briggs. Thank you, Patricia.
There we go. All right, so Vic, we're going to move along. You talked some about the benefits of having decision-making protocols that everyone uses, and let's kind of think about what are the benefits from community's perspective. Your community is waiting with bated breath to hear how 2,000 students are going to be reassigned. Your community now is waiting. How does that benefit when you're dealing with that external community? And then I'm going to ask you, how about school leadership community? Okay.
Sure. So part of that is that the T word, right? Everybody wants to talk about transparency. And have to be transparent as you're communicating what the problem is. We made a conscious effort to, like, a day after the fire, so people, because there was so much speculation in our community on Facebook and all these other things, everyone was saying, well, they should go to a Kmart, they should bring in this, there were a million things. And what we wanted to do, people didn't understand what an electrical panel was. They think it's the thing you go out in your garage and flip the switch to get your ceiling fan to stop, right? So we went over and did about a 2 to 3 minute video. I walked with my head of facilities and basically interviewed him as we walked through there, so people can see the devastation. This thing was burnt to a crisp. There was an explosion in there, and then everybody sort of, we weren't trying to put them back on their heels, but we wanted them to understand this is much bigger than you think it is. This isn't just wipe the desks down and get the kids back in the building and hook up a generator. So the first part was painting that picture. And the second part was the ongoing communication. I'm very fortunate in my district. I have an outstanding communications person who does way more than communication. She's a great problem solver, and she understands these Trigo tools very well. But people have to understand the why behind the decisions as you're moving forward. This builds confidence in your team members. And this helps your community wrap their arms around, okay, here, I understand why they're doing A, B, C, and D. They may not like it, but at least they understand why. And we disrupted another high school and another middle school so kids could go every other day. Within 6 days or 7 days, we had these kids back in school on a schedule. And we just converted their school. And so Grafton High School went to York High School. And the kids started and created their own mascot and called it Yorfton. So the kids were embracing it. Tab Middle School, where my children go, Grafton Middle went there and they called it something else like Taft or something. But so the teachers in those schools went right into the classroom. So the chemistry teacher went straight into the chemistry class. The Spanish person. So there was so much collaboration around this that the teachers bought into it as well. It was very difficult and challenging because they couldn't get in the building and get their stuff. You know how teachers are, right? They literally went into these schools with nothing 7 days later and started teaching immediately. We provided childcare because we had to go to school on Saturdays. Our teachers voiced their displeasure with having Saturdays. We understood that. So we found churches to offer them free childcare. And I had staff members volunteer to come to work and have childcare for them as well, for our teachers. So again, part of using the protocols to help you, they're really the foundation of your communication plan. And that's to me the shield that you use to help people understand the why.
Thanks. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Vic, before I move on to the next slide, I do remember hearing about through social media how some of your parents began addressing resistors. So once the decision was made and it was shared with the community, you weren't always the face that had to keep defending the decision.
Right. So there's a lot to that. We don't. Again, everyone's going to receive criticism for your decisions that you make as a leader, whatever position you're in. This was a big one, and I don't always have this beautiful, big, gray, ugly beard. But during the fire, it was hilarious. I would go to the YMCA or Walmart or wherever I was with my kids and family. Typically, I can just blend in. But after all the fire thing happened and we had to do the videos and all those types of things, people would recognize me, and the feedback was wonderful. You don't want to see your families fighting either, on Facebook, because everyone takes position, but you certainly appreciate when a family member steps up and says, look, that was a 300,000 square foot facility. Your idea of putting them in a big workshop like a vacant Kmart, which is 80,000 square feet with 3 bathrooms, isn't going to work. They've ruled that out, and they've said why. So, when you get people, when you include them in the decision-making process and you're constantly giving them information, they're more likely going to support you and defend you moving forward.
Okay, that's great. Now let's look ahead. In fact, we're right smack dab in the middle of the planning for COVID-19. So how has what you learned with the facility fire helped prepare you for what you're facing now, and what approach are you taking for the reopening? And because everyone is in this situation.
Yeah, again, we've used very similar tools. Again, when this whole thing started March 12th, we initially we got our reopening team together because we thought we were going to have an opportunity to reopen. But more in Virginia, we were looking at continuity of learning plans. So we were balancing, number one, we had a national group coming in Belfour to clean 300,000 square foot. So that project was going. Now we were managing continuity of learning plans for the spring, just like everybody else. And then we were also thinking, if there's a reopening plan, what are we going to do? So we used these tools many months ago, and we were not a one-on-one division. We did not have the funds for technology, for devices in each of our kids' hands. We did not have a learning management system. So in the past 2 months, the board and the board of supervisors supported a one-on-one initiative. So we're buying over 13,000 devices for our kids and our teachers. We've approved and we're using already this summer Canvas, which is a learning management system. We've hired the best teachers who understand utilizing instructional technology this summer. We've piloted that this summer. We've required our principals and assistant principals to observe classrooms teaching this summer through virtual opportunities so that they can understand what best practice looks like. And we've also, again, the other track was figuring out, how are you going to open up schools? Are you going to do 50%? How's 6-foot social distancing going to work out? The CDC guidelines. For us, it's the Virginia Department of Health and 133-page guidance document from the state of Virginia. So when you wrap all of those things together, my operations guy, who is extremely busy, it's his first year on the job as the operations person. I had Jim as my HR expert for 5 years, and then I moved him to ops. But he has used this solid processes. He used SCAN, and he used decision analysis and potential problem analysis and problem analysis multiple times with multiple teams throughout COVID. And it has been, it's been a slow, because sometimes it's very difficult to watch these teams struggle. But to me, that productive struggle is what's best, right? You don't want to get 15 people in the room, everyone agrees and walk out, and then it's wrong. So we've used that term, the productive struggle, many, many times, kind of how we use with our own children, right? So we've worked very hard with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn to the group and just ask you, what approach are you taking right now with this very complex planning process, knowing there's huge decisions that you're facing? How are you doing this? Let's hear from the audience. Chat or unmute yourself. Pat, feel free to share anything that you're hearing from some of the districts where you're working as well.
Well, it's interesting because I have been working with one organization that is all dedicated, you'll like this, Vic, to special ed. So it's 24 schools that are totally dedicated. And each one is a bit different. Each one has different behavioral issues. And so I've been working with them creating a generic plan. And then each school takes that and will then add their criteria and modify it so that it fits their environment. But we have specific guidelines. And then there are three alternatives, if you will: the hybrid model, there's also remote learning total, and then there's in-school total. So that's one group. Another one I've worked with, we've done 6 task force. I have one this afternoon. And basically those are broken up similar to what you said, even about the fire. And that is, facilities, curriculum and instruction, admin. And then each one of those is taking the model very similar to what you said. They start off with a SCAN, and now they're moving into some decision making. But interestingly enough, we have woven throughout the entire planning process PPA, a potential problem analysis, because within that, every single, even if you're talking about bringing the team together to do a SCAN or bringing the team together to look at a decision, they very often saying, well, first of all, let's think what could go wrong. What if we can't get everybody? What if we're not getting ownership? So that they kind of build that in. So I think it's very interesting to see that again, and of course I'm biased, but the process does give you that foundation. It gives you where to go with your information and what information you need. So I'm really impressed with the work that you've done, Vic, because you've married everything together. And I think it's a really good example for all those that are with us today to see when you take the time and slow it down to actually eventually speed it up, great success.
So, we've been talking about crisis leadership for most of our session. I'm going to go back to Dr. Shandor and let's think about what are the benefits that you have found in using really good critical thinking processes for the everyday stuff.
Well, when you think about and as everyone knows, there is a lot of everyday stuff. We had some situations with midterm exams. We had some situations. We had a very political situation hit us I guess about a year and a half ago, related to school recess time, special education programs, our gifted program. We have an Extend Center. So there's a number of issues that school divisions wrestle with all the time, not just during a crisis. And I think what I would share is, if you use these processes, this isn't a one-shot deal, so to speak. We had multiple trainings. Kathy has consulted with my teams for many years. It's that common language and it's the culture that you build. So our teams can argue with each other, have those hard conversations that lead us where we want to go. And then it helps you share the narrative. It's simple. And I always tell folks my standard, when we're sharing a decision or sharing the why, we need to do so that my dad understands. My father worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh for 38 years. Did not go to college. He was in the Navy. He was an electrician for 38 years. If my dad can understand what the problem is and what our strategy is to address it, then we're golden, because we can't use, sort of edu-speak as we're all this fancy language around things. We just got to keep things really simple, and most people will understand. And if you explain to them your process and how you've arrived at that decision, 95% of your people are going to say, you know what, that makes sense. This is why they ruled out A, B, C, and D and went with F. So we found those things very helpful.
So, those everyday decisions used to be considered high impact, high stress, and critical. Now they seem easy, don't they?
Well,
based on our
to me, none of this work is easy. But when you think about, we were looking at changing our start times for kids, our calendar, high school courses, midterms, like I said, the recess. They all seem like big decisions at the time, and then you're faced with this, and then you realize, there's bigger issues out there. I mean, we've got to make decisions based on the safety of our staff members and kids. That's very apparent. Yes, we care about the instructional model that we're going to put in front of our families. We understand there's going to be challenges with that, but at the end of the day, this is much bigger than test scores and all these other things. Like, we've got to make sure that we're keeping people safe.
Okay, thank you. So we're starting to wind down now, and what we've heard through Dr. Shandor is really a lot about the importance of building leadership capacity. And you have to do it early. You can't wait to build that capacity at the time that you most need it. Vic, maybe just a couple of thoughts about teacher leadership and aspiring leadership, because you're building your pipeline.
Yeah, so when you think about teacher leadership and aspiring leaders on multiple levels, I have many teachers that never want to be an administrator. They're like, I have no desire to be an administrator. Hey, that's fine. This stuff isn't for everybody. But they communicated they wanted to be a better teacher leader. So a few years ago, we started a teacher leadership program. We've picked 3 or 4 teachers from every building and put them in cohorts. And we've used a number of different models to help work them through leadership. So, and that's going on, and it's ongoing through the year. It's not like a one-shot deal. And we've really pushed professional learning communities in our school division. We've also pushed, their leadership and their voice and how are they going to lead. And we've given them multiple strategies for leading those teams. So that's one thing. And then the aspiring leadership part would be for, a teacher who has their endorsement in administration, or a assistant principal that maybe wants to move on. We've put them in a group that follow, and I'm trying to think of the name, it's Kuz's and Posner's work, Leadership Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Centered our aspiring leadership program around the Leadership Challenge, and there's 5 different qualities after like 30 years of research. So we've really used that, and the people in that pipeline, we've pulled multiple folks from there from that group, and we've moved them into either a principal position, associate director, and other positions. And what we told folks is, you're in there to learn, but don't kid yourself. We're all watching you, right? So we want to see it. It's very performance-based, activity-based. They have projects they have to do that impact their current work, but they have to demonstrate how they're using their leadership. So those are two simple programs. Listen, this works hard. When you think about curriculum changes, mental health right now, attendance, grading, all of these things, virtual learning and safety, 5 or 6 big heavy topics there that we're going to have to continue to work on as we navigate this. But you're not going to do any of that unless you have leadership and at multiple levels. It can't just be me. It just can't be a principal. You have to have multiple folks who are inspired, who have that fire in their belly and passion to keep pushing with this stuff.
Well, we're going to wind down now, and I just want to say, Dr. Shandor, thank you. This has been really very valuable for us, and we'll have this recorded webinar on our website. And for those who are in our audience, I'm going to be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint, and you'll see, if you are interested in getting to the documentation of all that was done with the Grafton Complex work, this link will help get you there. I also will be sending you a copy of a publication that came from LRP that's called Ready for Anything, Making Complex Decisions with Confidence and Clarity. And that's something that Dr. Shandor wrote. Here's our contact information. Again, I'll send this to you through your email. We appreciate you joining us. It's a tough time for leaders, and so any tool we think that can be helpful for leaders would be a tool that probably can be put in place right now. Again, thank you for joining us. Vic, it's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Kathy. And if anyone out there wants to reach out, my information obviously is on there, and I can share anything related to Trigo tools or anything around related to leadership.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good luck this year.
Thank you, everyone.